The look on my sister's face when she realized that the broke loser she'd been mocking for years was actually her company's owner, that moment made every sleepless night worth it. But let me back up, because this story starts with a $20 bill and ends with a $5 million empire. If you've ever been underestimated by your own family, if you've ever had someone dismiss your worth based on appearances, then buckle up. This is the story of how I turned my sister's cruelty into the most satisfying revenge of my life. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious justice, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. Hi, my name is Rachel, I'm 28 years old, and I've spent most of my adult life being treated like the family disappointment. I'm a software engineer who started my own tech company 3 years ago, but to my family, especially my sister, I've always just been the quiet, awkward one who plays with computers. Well, that perception was about to change in the most spectacular way possible. Let me paint you a picture of my family dynamics, because context is everything here. My sister Madison is 32, 4 years older than me, and she's what you'd call a golden child. She married her college boyfriend right after graduation, lives in a massive house in the suburbs, drives a BMW, and works as a marketing director for a mid-sized tech company. She's always been the one with the perfect life, the perfect husband, the perfect everything. Me? I've always been different. While Madison was out partying in college, I was in my dorm room coding until 3 a.m. While she was planning her dream wedding, I was dropping out of my master's program to work on what would eventually become my company. While she was buying designer handbags, I was living on ramen noodles and reinvesting every penny back into my startup. But here's the thing about family dynamics, sometimes they get frozen in time. To my parents, Madison was still the successful daughter with the stable job and the respectable husband. And I was still the weird computer girl who made questionable life choices. The incident that sparked everything happened 3 months ago at Madison's birthday party. Now, let me set the scene for you because the details matter. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring, and Madison had organized this elaborate backyard barbecue at her house. We're talking about a catered affair with a bartender, fancy decorations, the works. She'd invited about 50 people, friends, co-workers, extended family, even some of her husband's business associates. I had been dreading this party for weeks. Not because I don't love my sister, despite everything, I do, but because these family gatherings always felt like a performance where I was perpetually cast as the supporting character in Madison's starring role. I remember standing in my small apartment that morning, staring at the gift I'd wrapped for her. It was a beautiful silk scarf I'd found at a local boutique, nothing extravagant, but it was in her favorite color and the pattern reminded me of a trip we'd taken together when we were kids. The scarf cost me $50, which might not sound like much, but at the time, I was being incredibly careful with my personal spending. Every dollar I didn't absolutely need for living expenses was going straight back into my company. You see, what my family didn't know, what nobody knew except my business partner and our lawyer, was that my little computer hobby had just landed its biggest contract ever. We'd been working in stealth mode for months, developing a revolutionary data analytics platform, and we'd just signed a deal that would transform us from a scrappy startup into a legitimate player in the tech industry. But I couldn't tell anyone yet. The contract had strict confidentiality clauses, and we were still in the integration phase. Plus, honestly, I'd been burned before by sharing my successes too early. There's something about family that makes them experts at finding ways to diminish your achievements, and I wasn't ready for that. So there I was, walking into Madison's party with my $50 gift, looking like exactly what everyone expected, the struggling younger sister with her modest present and her off-the-rack dress. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. Madison looked stunning, of course, in a designer sundress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She was holding court by the pool, surrounded by her perfectly coiffed friends, laughing at something her husband had said. When she saw me approaching, her face lit up with that particular smile she reserved for family gatherings, the one that looked genuine but had just a hint of patronizing sweetness. "Rachel," she called out, loud enough for everyone in the immediate vicinity to hear. "You made it. Come here, everyone, I want you to meet my little sister." I felt my stomach clench. There it was already, little sister. Not my sister the entrepreneur or my sister the software engineer. Just little sister, with all the diminishing implications that phrase carries. I walked over, gift in hand, and gave her a hug. She felt so confident in my arms, so sure of her place in the world. I remember thinking how different we must have looked to everyone watching, her, glowing and expensive, me, practical and understated. "Happy birthday, Madison," I said, holding out the wrapped scarf. "I hope you like it." She took the gift with a smile, but I could see her weighing it in her hands, probably estimating its value. Madison had always been good at that, assessing the worth of things, of people, of situations. "Oh, you shouldn't have," she said, but not in the way that means you're too generous. More in the way that means you really shouldn't have bothered. Now, here's where things get interesting. Madison didn't open the gift right away. Instead, she set it aside with the others and continued socializing. I found myself standing awkwardly with a group of her coworkers, trying to make small talk about their jobs in marketing and sales while nursing a beer and counting the minutes until I could politely leave. About an hour later, Madison decided it was time for the gift-opening ceremony. She'd arranged all the presents on a large table on the patio and was opening them one by one, making a show of reading each card and thanking the giver. I watched as she opened gift after gift. Expensive jewelry from her in-laws. A weekend spa package from her best friend. Designer sunglasses from her coworkers. A high-end kitchen appliance from her husband. Each gift was met with genuine excitement and effusive thanks. Then she got to mine. I felt my heart rate pick up as she lifted the small, modestly wrapped box. The crowd had thinned a bit by this point, but there were still about 20 people gathered around watching. She opened it carefully, unfolding the tissue paper to reveal the silk scarf. For just a moment, I saw something flicker across her face, maybe genuine appreciation for the color or the pattern. But then she held it up, and I could see her processing it, calculating its value against the other gifts she'd received. "Oh," she said, and that single word carried so much weight. It's very nice, Rachel." "Thank you." But she wasn't done. Oh no, she wasn't done. She turned to her friend Sarah, who was standing next to her, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Isn't it sweet how Rachel still shops at the mall? Some of us remember what it was like to be on a budget." The comment hit me like a physical blow. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment and anger. Around me, I could see people exchanging glances, some looking uncomfortable, others barely suppressing smirks. But Madison wasn't finished. She was on a roll now, perhaps emboldened by the audience or maybe just caught up in the moment of being the center of attention. I mean, $50 goes so much further when you're shopping at department stores instead of boutiques, she continued, examining the scarf more closely. Though I suppose when you're still trying to make it as a, what do you call yourself now? A tech entrepreneur? She said it with air quotes, like it was a cute delusion rather than my actual profession. I stood there, frozen, feeling like everyone at the party was staring at me. My hands were shaking slightly, and I had to grip my beer bottle tighter to keep it steady. This was my sister, the person who was supposed to support me, publicly humiliating me in front of her friends and coworkers. "It's thoughtful," Madison concluded, folding the scarf back into its box with the careful precision of someone handling something fragile but not particularly valuable. Rachel's always been the practical one in the family. Practical. The word stung because I knew how she meant it. Not practical as in sensible or efficient, but practical as in limited, as in someone who had to make do with less. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to tell everyone there exactly how wrong they were about me, about my success, about my worth. But I couldn't. The confidentiality agreements I'd signed meant I couldn't breathe a word about the contract that was about to change everything. So I did what I'd always done in these situations. I smiled, nodded, and started planning my exit strategy. Well, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt, I should probably head out. Early morning tomorrow. Madison gave me another one of those patronizing smiles. Of course, work never stops for entrepreneurs, right? Another little dig, delivered with sisterly affection that felt more like a paper cut. I made my rounds, saying goodbye to relatives and thanking Madison for the party. As I walked to my car, I could hear laughter from the backyard, and I couldn't help but wonder if they were still talking about me, still analyzing my cheap gift and my struggling lifestyle. I sat in my car for a full 5 minutes before starting the engine, letting the anger and humiliation wash over me. My hands were still shaking, but now it wasn't from embarrassment, it was from pure, undiluted fury. How dare she? How dare she make assumptions about my financial situation? How dare she mock my gift in front of all those people? How dare she treat me like I was some charity case she had to tolerate? But underneath the anger was something else, something that had been building for years. It was the realization that no matter what I achieved, no matter how successful I became, my family would always see me as the same awkward kid who preferred computers to people. Well, that was about to change. The drive home gave me time to think, to plan, to let the initial fury crystallize into something more focused and purposeful. By the time I pulled into my apartment complex, I knew exactly what I was going to do. You see, Madison worked for a company called TechFlow Solutions. It was a decent-sized firm that specialized in data analytics and business intelligence, exactly the kind of company that would be very interested in the platform my team had been developing. And here's the beautiful irony, the big contract I'd mentioned earlier? The one that was about to transform my company? It was with Madison's biggest client. The client that represented about 40% of TechFlow's annual revenue. But that's not even the best part. 3 weeks after Madison's party, I got a call from our lawyer. The client was so impressed with our initial deliverables that they wanted to discuss additional services. Specifically, they were considering consolidating all their analytics work with us, which would mean pulling their contract from TechFlow entirely. But why stop there? If we were going to take on this level of work, we'd need to scale up quickly. We'd need to hire experienced analysts, project managers, maybe even acquire a smaller firm to handle the transition. Guess which mid-sized analytics company had exactly the team and infrastructure we'd need? I spent the next 2 weeks doing due diligence on TechFlow Solutions. Financial reports, client lists, employee information, everything I could legally access. What I found was fascinating. TechFlow was well managed but not particularly innovative. They'd been riding on their reputation and established client relationships for years, but they hadn't invested much in new technology or methodologies. They were exactly the kind of company that was vulnerable to disruption from a more agile, tech-forward competitor. More importantly, they were heavily dependent on a few large clients. Losing even one major account would put them in a very precarious position. Losing their biggest client? That would be catastrophic. But I'm not cruel. I'm not interested in destroying people's livelihoods just for revenge. What I was interested in was justice, and maybe a little poetic irony. So I made Madison's company an offer. Not directly, of course. Everything went through lawyers and business brokers. But the offer was simple. My company would acquire TechFlow Solutions, retain all existing employees, and honor all current contracts, except for the one with the client that was moving to us anyway. The purchase price? $5 million. Cash. The beauty of the whole situation was that it was genuinely a good business decision. TechFlow had talented people, established processes, and a solid client base. Acquiring them would give us the infrastructure we needed to handle our rapid growth while providing job security for their employees. It was a win-win for everyone involved. Well, except for the part where Madison was about to discover that her broke little sister was now her boss. The acquisition process took about 6 weeks. During that time, I had to resist the urge to drop hints or gloat. I went to family dinners and listened to Madison complain about uncertainty at work, about rumors of a buyout, about how stressful it was not knowing what the future held. I made appropriate sympathetic noises and kept my mouth shut. The announcement was made on a Thursday morning. All TechFlow employees were called into a company-wide meeting to meet their new ownership. I had planned this moment carefully, choosing to introduce myself not as the CEO, but as the founder and majority owner of the acquiring company. I wore my best suit, the one I'd bought for investor meetings but had never had occasion to wear to family functions. I had my hair professionally styled and spent extra time on my makeup. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a successful business owner who commanded respect. The TechFlow conference room was packed. I could see Madison sitting in the third row, looking nervous but trying to maintain her professional composure. She hadn't noticed me yet. I was standing at the back with the other executives, waiting for our introduction. The TechFlow CEO, soon to be my employee, began the meeting by explaining the acquisition and introducing the new ownership team. When he called my name and asked me to step forward, I watched Madison's face very carefully. At first, there was just confusion. She was looking around the room, probably wondering why someone was calling a name that sounded like her sister's. Then her eyes found me walking toward the front of the room, and I saw the exact moment when recognition hit. Her face went completely white. Her mouth actually fell open. I could see her mind racing, trying to process what she was seeing, trying to reconcile the successful business owner standing at the front of the room with her image of her struggling little sister. I stepped up to the microphone and smiled at the room full of people who were about to become my employees. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "My name is Rachel Martinez, and I'm the founder and CEO of Dynamic Analytics Solutions. I'm excited to welcome you all to our growing family of companies." I went on to deliver the speech I'd prepared, talking about our vision, our commitment to employee retention, our plans for growth and innovation. But I kept glancing at Madison, watching her process this new reality. After the formal presentation, there was a reception where the new ownership team mingled with the TechFlow employees. I was talking to one of their senior analysts when I saw Madison approaching out of the corner of my eye. She looked like she was walking to her own execution. "Rachel," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Could I talk to you for a minute?" I excused myself from my conversation and followed her to a quiet corner of the room. Up close, I could see that she was shaking slightly, and there were spots of red high on her cheekbones, the way she always looked when she was deeply embarrassed. "I don't understand," she said. "How is this possible? You're my sister. You live in that tiny apartment. You drive a 10-year-old Honda. You gave me a $50 scarf for my birthday." I looked at her for a long moment before responding. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the culmination of weeks of planning and years of being underestimated. "Madison," I said quietly, "just because I choose to live modestly doesn't mean I have to. Just because I don't feel the need to show off my success doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And just because you assumed I was struggling doesn't mean your assumptions were correct. She stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. But how? When? I don't understand how this happened. It happened, I said, because while you were focused on appearances and status symbols, I was focused on building something real. It happened because while you were judging me for shopping at the mall, I was closing deals worth millions of dollars. It happened because I never let your opinion of me define what I was capable of. I could see tears starting to form in her eyes, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I remembered the humiliation I'd felt at her party, the years of subtle put-downs and condescending comments, the way she'd made me feel small in front of all those people. The scarf I gave you? I continued. I didn't buy it because it was all I could afford. I bought it because I thought you'd like it, because it reminded me of when we were kids and actually enjoyed each other's company. The fact that you chose to mock it, to use it as an opportunity to humiliate me in front of your friends. That says a lot more about you than it does about me. Madison was crying openly now, but quietly, trying not to make a scene in front of her coworkers, my employees. Rachel, I'm so sorry, she whispered. I had no idea. I never meant to. You never meant to what? I interrupted. You never meant to make me feel like garbage? You never meant to mock my gift in front of everyone? You never meant to treat me like some kind of charity case? She couldn't answer, because we both knew that wasn't true. She had meant to do all of those things, maybe not maliciously, but because it made her feel better about herself to position me as the struggling sister who needed her pity. I need you to understand something, I said, my voice still quiet but carrying absolute steel. This acquisition isn't about revenge. This is a legitimate business decision that makes sense for both companies. You're a good employee, Madison, and you'll be treated fairly. But the dynamic between us has changed permanently. I paused, letting that sink in. I'm not your little sister anymore, Madison. I'm your boss. The reception continued around us, but Madison and I stood in our little bubble of tension and revelation. I could see her trying to process not just the facts of the situation, but the complete inversion of our family dynamic. What happens now? She asked finally. Now you go back to work, I said. You continue doing your job, which from what I can see, you do very well. You'll report to the same manager you always have, and your day-to-day won't change much. But you'll do it knowing that the person you've been dismissing for years is the one signing your paychecks. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Madison? I kept the scarf. It really is beautiful. I wear it to board meetings now. The aftermath of that day was everything I'd hoped for and more. Word spread quickly through both companies about the family connection, and I could feel the shift in how people perceived me. Suddenly, the modest lifestyle that had been seen as evidence of failure was reframed as impressive restraint. The quiet confidence that had been mistaken for insecurity was recognized as the real thing. But the most satisfying part wasn't the professional recognition or the business success. It was the phone call I got from my mother 2 days later. Rachel, she said, her voice full of a wonder I'd never heard before, Madison told me about your company. Why didn't you ever tell us you were so successful? It was a fair question, and I gave her an honest answer. Because I was tired of having to prove myself to my own family. Because I was tired of being seen as the disappointing daughter. Because I wanted to build something real before I had to defend it to people who should have believed in me from the start. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. We're proud of you, she said finally. We've always been proud of you. Maybe we didn't show it the right way, but we are. I believed her, mostly. But it stung a little that it had taken a $5 million acquisition for my family to see my worth. The integration of tech flow into dynamic analytics went smoothly. Madison and I maintained a professional relationship at work, and she actually became one of our most effective team leaders. She seemed to throw herself into proving that she deserved her position based on merit, not family connections. But the real change was in our personal relationship. The old dynamic, the successful older sister patronizing the struggling younger one, was gone forever. In its place was something more complex but ultimately more honest. Madison never again made assumptions about my financial situation. She never again made comments about my budget lifestyle or my career choices. When we were together at family gatherings, she treated me with a respect that had been absent for years. And you know what? That respect felt better than any revenge could have. The weeks following that acquisition announcement were like living in a completely different reality. I had to keep reminding myself that this wasn't a dream. I really was now the owner of a $5 million company, and my sister really was my employee. But the story doesn't end there. Oh no, it gets so much better. You see, after that initial shock wore off, Madison did something I didn't expect. Instead of becoming resentful or trying to transfer to another department, she doubled down on proving herself. It was like watching someone wake up from a long sleep and suddenly realize they'd been sleepwalking through their career. About 2 weeks after the acquisition, I was reviewing performance reports when something caught my attention. Madison had submitted 3 new client proposals in the past 10 days, more than she'd typically do in a month. Not only that, but they were good. Really good. Creative, thorough, and backed by solid research. I found myself in the strange position of being genuinely impressed by my sister's work while still processing the fact that she was working for me. Then something even more interesting happened. Madison requested a meeting with me. Not through her manager, not through HR, but directly. She sent me an email that was professional, respectful, and completely different from any communication we'd ever had as sisters. Rachel, the email read, I would like to schedule a meeting to discuss some ideas I have for improving our client acquisition process. I believe I've identified some opportunities that could significantly impact our growth trajectory. Please let me know when you might have time available. No hey sis, no casual tone, no assumptions about family privilege. Just pure professionalism. I scheduled the meeting for the following Thursday at 2 p.m. in my office. Yes, I now had an office. A corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. Sometimes I still couldn't believe it was real. Madison arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing what I recognized as her most professional outfit. She knocked on my open door and waited for permission to enter. Come in, Madison, I said, gesturing to the chairs across from my desk. What happened next was one of the most surreal conversations of my life. For 45 minutes, Madison presented a comprehensive analysis of our current client acquisition strategies, complete with market research, competitor analysis, and detailed recommendations for improvement. And she was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I found myself taking notes, asking follow-up questions, and genuinely engaging with her ideas. This wasn't my annoying older sister who made snide comments about my lifestyle choices. This was a talented marketing professional who had clearly been underutilizing her skills. Madison, I said when she finished her presentation, this is exceptional work. Why haven't I seen this level of initiative from you before? She was quiet for a moment, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. Honestly, she said finally. Because I got comfortable. I've been coasting for the past few years, doing the minimum required to keep my job and collect my paycheck. I never had a reason to push myself harder. And now you do? She looked me directly in the eyes. Now I'm working for someone whose opinion actually matters to me. Someone I've underestimated my entire life, and who I now realize could teach me things about business that I never even knew I didn't know. I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't the apology I'd been expecting, but it was something better. It was recognition. Real recognition. I want to implement these recommendations, I told her. But I want you to lead the initiative. You'll report directly to me on this project, and if it's successful, we'll talk about expanding your role. The look of shock on her face was almost comical. You'd trust me with that? After everything? Madison, I said, I'm not interested in punishing you. I'm interested in results. And if you can deliver results like this, then personal history becomes irrelevant. That was the beginning of what I now think of as Madison's transformation. Over the next month, she threw herself into the client acquisition project with an energy and creativity I'd never seen from her. She worked late nights, came in on weekends, and produced work that was consistently excellent. But more than that, she started treating me differently in all aspects of our relationship. At family dinners, she would ask me about business challenges and actually listen to my responses. She started reading industry publications and would text me articles she thought I'd find interesting. She even asked me for career advice. It was like having a completely different sister. 3 months after the acquisition, Madison's client acquisition initiative had generated over $800,000 in new business. I promoted her to senior marketing director and gave her a substantial raise. The day I called her into my office to tell her about the promotion, she actually teared up. Rachel, she said, I need you to know something. Working for you has been the best thing that's ever happened to my career. You pushed me to be better than I ever thought I could be. Madison, I replied, you were always capable of this level of work. You just needed a reason to access it. But the real vindication came 6 months later, at the company holiday party. Picture this, an elegant ballroom at one of the city's finest hotels, about 200 employees from both companies, plus their spouses and partners. I was wearing a designer dress that had cost more than most people's monthly rent, not because I needed to show off, but because I finally felt like I deserved to dress the part of a successful CEO. During the dinner, I was asked to give a speech about the company's achievements over the past year. I talked about our growth, our successful integration, our plans for the future. Standard CEO stuff. But then I decided to do something unplanned. I want to take a moment, I said, to recognize someone whose work has been instrumental in our success this year. Someone who has shown what's possible when talent meets opportunity and determination. I could see Madison at her table, looking puzzled about where this was going. Madison Martinez, I continued, has led our most successful client acquisition initiative in company history. Her innovative approach to market analysis and her relentless pursuit of excellence have generated nearly $1 million in new business and set the standard for what we expect from our leadership team. The applause was genuine and enthusiastic. Madison looked stunned. But more than that, I added, Madison has demonstrated something that I think is crucial for any successful organization. She's shown that when we're willing to challenge our own assumptions, when we're willing to push ourselves beyond what feels comfortable, we can achieve things we never thought possible. I raised my glass. To Madison, and to everyone else who refuses to settle for good enough. The toast was echoed throughout the room, and I watched as Madison's colleagues, her peers and subordinates, looked at her with new respect. She had earned this recognition through her work, through her results, through her transformation from comfortable mediocrity to driven excellence. After the dinner, as people were mingling and dancing, Madison found me by the bar. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For seeing potential in me that I didn't see in myself. For giving me the chance to prove what I could do. For not letting our history define our future. I smiled. Madison, you did the work. I just provided the opportunity. No, she said, shaking her head. You did more than that. You showed me what real leadership looks like. You showed me what it means to succeed with grace. We stood there for a moment, and I realized that something had fundamentally changed between us. We weren't just sisters anymore, and we weren't just boss and employee. We were two professional women who respected each other's abilities and supported each other's success. But the ultimate validation came the following spring, almost exactly 1 year after that disastrous birthday party that started this whole journey. Madison was planning another birthday celebration, but this time she asked me to help organize it. Not because she needed my money, her new salary and bonuses meant she could afford whatever she wanted, but because she genuinely wanted my input. I want to do something different this year, she told me over lunch one day. Something more meaningful than just showing off. We planned a celebration that was elegant but not ostentatious, sophisticated but not pretentious. Madison invited a smaller group of people, close friends, family, a few colleagues she genuinely enjoyed spending time with. The night of the party, I arrived with my gift. This time, I hadn't held back. It was a beautiful piece of jewelry from a high-end designer, something that clearly cost significantly more than $50. But Madison's reaction to my gift wasn't what made the evening special. What made it special was when she stood up to thank everyone for coming and said, "I want to take a moment to acknowledge someone who has changed my life this year. My sister Rachel has taught me what it means to be truly successful, not just financially, but professionally, personally, and ethically." She looked directly at me. "Rachel, you could have used your position to make things difficult for me. You could have held grudges or treated me unfairly. Instead, you gave me the opportunity to become the best version of myself. You've been an incredible boss, an inspiring mentor, and most importantly, you've been the sister I always should have recognized you as." The room was completely silent, and I felt tears starting to form in my eyes. Last year, Madison continued, I made some comments about Rachel's gift that I deeply regret. Comments that revealed more about my own insecurities and prejudices than they did about her generosity. Tonight, I want everyone to know that my sister is not just successful in business, she's successful as a human being. She raised her glass. To Rachel, who taught me that real strength isn't about putting others down to build yourself up. It's about lifting others up while you rise. The applause that followed felt different from any recognition I'd received before. This wasn't about my business success or my financial achievements. This was about who I had chosen to be when I had the power to be petty, vindictive, or cruel. After the party, as Madison and I were cleaning up, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Open it." Inside was a handwritten letter, 3 pages long, in Madison's careful script. It was an apology, not just for the birthday party incident, but for years of subtle dismissiveness, condescension, and failure to see my worth. But more than that, it was a thank you letter. She thanked me for showing her what leadership looked like, for giving her the chance to grow, for treating her fairly despite our complicated history. "Madison," I said when I finished reading, "you didn't need to write this." "Yes, I did," she replied. "Because I needed you to know that I understand now. I understand what I put you through, and I understand what you chose not to put me through." We hugged then, and it felt like the final piece of healing between us. Today, 2 years after that first birthday party disaster, Madison is my Vice President of Strategic Development. She's earned every promotion, every raise, every opportunity through her own merit and hard work. Our company has grown to over 150 employees and $50 million in annual revenue. Madison's innovations in client acquisition and retention have been a major factor in that growth. But more importantly, our relationship has become something I never thought possible. We're not just sisters, and we're not just colleagues. We're partners in building something meaningful together. Madison still gives me gifts, and I still give her gifts. But now those gifts represent genuine appreciation and affection rather than obligation or appearance management. And yes, I still have that silk scarf. I've worn it to some of the most important meetings of my career, not because it's expensive or impressive, but because it reminds me of something important. Your worth isn't determined by other people's recognition of it. The most satisfying part of this whole story isn't that I proved Madison wrong about my success. It's that I proved something to myself, that when you have the power to be petty, choosing to be principled instead is the ultimate victory. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's becoming so successful that revenge becomes irrelevant, and then using that success to lift up the people who doubted you. That's a lesson worth more than any $5 million company. But the story has one more twist that I think you'll appreciate. Last month, Madison came to me with a business proposal. She wants to start her own consulting firm, specializing in the client acquisition strategies she's developed while working for me. Instead of seeing this as competition or betrayal, I'm going to be her first investor. Because here's what I've learned, real success isn't about keeping others down so you can stay on top. Real success is about creating opportunities for everyone to rise. Madison's consulting firm will be a client of ours, handling overflow work and specialized projects. She'll be successful on her own terms, using skills she developed while working for me, with my financial backing and professional support. It's the perfect ending to a story that started with humiliation and evolved into mutual respect, professional collaboration, and genuine sisterly love. And every time I look at that silk scarf hanging in my closet, I smile. Because it represents something beautiful, the moment when being underestimated became the best thing that ever happened to me. The most beautiful part of this whole story is that the revenge wasn't destructive, it was constructive. Instead of tearing Madison down, I lifted myself up so high that she had no choice but to acknowledge my success. Instead of making her lose her job, I became her boss and helped her become better at it. The look on her face when she realized that her broke little sister owned a $5 million company will stay with me forever. It was shock, embarrassment, recognition, and respect all rolled into one perfect moment of realization. But more than that, it was the moment when years of condescension and assumptions crumbled in the face of undeniable reality. It was justice served not with cruelty, but with competence. Looking back on this whole experience, I've learned something important about family dynamics and respect. Sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who have the hardest time seeing us clearly. They get stuck in old patterns, old assumptions, old versions of who we used to be. My sister wasn't being cruel when she mocked my gift, she was being thoughtless. She had created a story about who I was and what I was capable of, and she never bothered to question whether that story was still true. The revenge wasn't really about proving her wrong, though that was satisfying. It was about demanding the respect I deserved and creating a situation where that respect was impossible to deny. Would I do it again? Absolutely. But I'd probably tell my family about my success earlier. Not because I need their validation, but because secrets have a way of creating exactly the kind of misunderstandings that led to this whole situation in the first place. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should believe in you most, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had a moment when you got to prove your doubters wrong? How did it feel? Hit that like button if you enjoyed this tale of sibling justice, and subscribe for more stories about people who got exactly what they deserved. Trust me, I've got plenty more where this came from, and some of them are even more satisfying than this one. Remember, sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting ahead. Way ahead.